encouraging the community and congregation to attend the Easter Drive-In. And if not, always remember you can watch us online on Facebook or on YouTube for the Easter Drive-In at First Christian Church, 111 South 28th Street in Clinton, this Easter Sunday beginning at 10 a.m.
Weatherford Save-A-Lot on Washington and Main in the Weatherford Shopping Center understands the current situation can be challenging for many. To keep their customers as informed as possible, they've created a Weatherford Save-A-Lot Facebook group with the latest prices and product availability. Go to @SAL Weatherford OK on Facebook today. Weatherford Save-A-Lot prices are just as low as ever, and they are here for you. Make Save-A-Lot your first stop, and it could be the only stop you need. Check out @SAL Weatherford OK on Facebook.
The new Van and John Show on the Coyote.
It's Conversation Corner, brought to us by Lucille's Roadhouse, joined by State Senator Brent Howard this morning. And you said you're practicing social distancing on the farm today.
Yes. Out here, picked the asparagus this morning and just watching the wheat grow.
That sounds exciting. Now, you guys have had a scare in the state senate. Was it a senator that tested positive, or what? I know a staffer, and it kind of became a big deal.
Yes. Well, initially there was a staffer, so third floor, not really direct contact with any of our state senators or staff. Hey,
get them.
That happens. That's been happening to a lot of us. We've been working from home, and we're trying to pull it off, and then all of a sudden it's like the dog has to let everyone know, you know?
Yeah.
I normally get
my dad's pulling up with his dog, and so they don't like each other.
I normally get Dad. Like,
oh, yeah.
Girls, just give me. I'm on a conference call. Just give me like 5 minutes.
What kind of dog do you have?
Blue heeler.
Okay.
Nice.
I was seeing some healers.
I used to have a blue heeler back in high school, and his name was Oreo. Not really much to point to that story. Anyways, yeah. So we're talking. So then what happened after the staffer tested positive?
And so there was not found any direct contact with any of our other staff. There was no positive test that came from his initial test, but then there was a state senator that had a town hall meeting, and he tested positive just a few days later. But he had been social distancing pretty much the entire time from the time that he started feeling any sickness and was in his own house. So he's better now. He's partaking in all of our Zoom calls and is recovered, has had negative tests. So Senate, we are free right now of any transmission side.
Well, that's good. Let's talk about the bills then, the financial side of it. So, of course, Oklahoma came out and they said there was going to be a shortfall, that there was not enough money to finish out this fiscal year, now the fiscal year ends in April. Am I right on that? Or ends in May?
It ends June 30th.
Okay, June 30th. I'm sorry.
Fiscal year. Yeah.
And so they, realizing they were going to be about $200-300 million short of that. And then that number, of course, still continues to grow, as not only with this COVID-19, but Oklahoma's economy was in trouble way before that with oil and gas taking out. And so that's kind of where we're at. And then now everybody got together and came up with a plan and try to fund it through the rest of the fiscal year. But then the governor didn't like it. Kind of walk me through all of that process and where we're at now.
Okay. Well, pretty much hit on the head. What started all of this was just the plummet in oil and gas prices, and we are heavily reliant upon those commodities as a state, as well as some of the agriculture commodities, and those have taken a dive for the most part too. But we started seeing this around December time frame, and there was about an $80 million budget shortfall that was going to be anticipated, which was within our 5% that we budget from the start. And then as we rolled into all of this, the numbers from February were coming in around $212 million short, and now we're at 456, I believe, is the number. Now that final number has not ever been certified by the Board of Equalization. The governor is the chair of that board, and that was part of why we went in on Monday, and all of that was scheduled was that we were going to address the numbers that were certified by the Board of Equalization, but then the governor canceled that meeting. So we don't have final numbers or official numbers on what the actual shortfall is right now, but we were trying to address it based upon that $456 million.
Talking to Harold, State Representative Wright, yesterday. Now, the other issue I have concerns with is with the $450 million, let's just say, is our shortfall. The rainy day fund has about 900, to 1.1 billion in it somewhere. What next year? Obviously, how are we not going when we're planning next year's budget? How do we not make cuts without completely emptying the rainy day fund?
There are going to be cuts going into next year, so that's going to be. That's still being talked about. We haven't passed anything on next year's budget for fiscal 21. So those numbers are still being discussed. What we're trying to look at least on the use of rainy day fund and revenue stabilization for this year, is it was going to be a 6% cut across the board, and that's not 6% of what you would have gotten in April, 6% of what you would have gotten in May, 6% of what you would have gotten in June. That's 6% of what you would have received for the entire year. And since they've already received 75% of that, 9 months, that 6% over the last 3 months would have amounted to about 18% for each of those months to make up for what's already been spent out. So trying to address this and just the crisis we're in, what the legislature wanted to do was basically fund everything, and then the governor was initially coming in and saying, a 1 to 2% cut for the rest of this year. What we were looking at, the limitation is within the Constitution, any application has to be applied across the boards. So if there's a revenue failure and then there's money drawn from rainy day fund, you can't go in and pick and choose where it's best to apply it. It goes, and those cuts are either all the way across the board or everything's funded.
Right, so it makes it difficult to say you put less in education. We'll leave education alone, but we'll take some money out of roads, or vice versa. You're not able to do that.
Yeah. Under the Constitution, that is correct. We're not able to do that. So, kind of what the big thing that's come back in and why the governor's not signing this final bill on that is that one of the places that was cut was his digital transformation. Actually, I think the only place that was cut is and so he's kind of going to say, look, we're going to fund everything on this. We're going to ask our agency heads and boards and commissions to find their cuts within so that they'll have more carryover. But he wants to make sure that everything is funded throughout that part. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting times to see how this comes out. I would say the honeymoon's over with the legislature and the governor, but marriages can still survive and we can still work together. I just hate to see that it's happening during this time of crisis.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think that's why everybody's kind of panicking. They're unsure of the certainty of the financial. We literally just got these teachers these raises. We literally just got a lot of this funding, and then I also look back at this, and I don't know much about. If you ever look at my bank account, please don't. You're going to know that I am probably the worst person to ever give financial advice. But my question to this is, Oklahoma's state budget, state spending, I would say is around $25 billion. Am I close for the year?
Yeah, 26
billion.
Somewhere in there when you're talking about all government, yeah.
Now, I listen to Dave Ramsey every now and then on our sister station, and it says, hey, my emergency fund needs to get me through 3 months. 3 months of something, just in case something happens, something goes bad, something goes south, or whatever. And I know this isn't apples to apples with the state government, but how do we not? And it's easy to say now, looking on it, but is $1 billion enough in the rainy day fund? I mean, in 3 months of us, divide that 26 is somewhere around $6 billion. I just feel like this is what happened is now 1 year's bad, the next year's bad, and now all of a sudden a rainy day fund is completely empty, and we're not even close to being able to, if it's a third year bad in a row, without people losing their jobs.
Well, there's a little bit of crossover on there, like that apples to apples or apples to oranges type deal. Whenever we're talking about appropriations, so the rainy day fund is based upon what the Senate or House legislature can actually appropriate through budget process. And that's been that $3 billion for the past few years. And so we're limited to 15% of that amount is our cap. There have been some proposals. Again, that's something that's written into our state constitution.
Right.
There was actually a proposal this year to basically double that, have it up to where we could do 30% set aside in the rainy day fund. It's also the reason that the revenue stabilization was put onto the ballot in 2018, which failed. It was an alternative to be able to put some money aside so that it didn't have to all be spent. But a lot of the other side of that, so we're still talking about $18 billion, that either comes from local sources, you're talking about your sales taxes, or your federal side. So being able to set aside and cover those, this is the first time we've ever seen total economic shutdown like we have. And normally those are pretty steady. So that side of apportionment rather than appropriations normally still comes in, even if there is revenue failure on the income tax side or drilling side. So this is just unprecedented. I think we do need to look at it. But in a call yesterday, we were talking about, rainy day fund is there to be used whenever there is an emergency, and we haven't ever seen an emergency like this. So being able to pull it out and try to stabilize things is what it is there for.
No, I mean, I completely agree with that. I don't want to. I know this is unprecedented with the COVID-19 and going on, but with the oil, like you said, we were in ag crashing down. We were in trouble before this even happened, and I think this has happened to us 5 years ago. It happened to us again in the 80s. It's happened, Oklahoma. It's a roller coaster ride with the oil field and with that kind of energy.
Yeah, it is, and what we're trying to do and looking at is ways to diversify that and put in more stable. Right now, aviation is kind of where we're looking at, as well as some information technology and transportation side. But all that just takes some time, and trying to get off something that we've relied on for nearly 100 years it takes a while to turn a big ship.
No, you're exactly right. Let's talk about COVID-19. Of course, 3.4 million Oklahomans in the state of Oklahoma. We have 1,700 infected. That number does seem kind of low, but at the same time, I think it's because we've done a good job. The death rate, of course, is at 80, I believe, last I saw. Oklahomans have passed away due to COVID-19. Do you think, in your personal opinion, should we be shelter in place, nobody leave the house, everything shut down, you can only go to the pharmacy, you can only go to the grocery store, that's it? Or do you feel like the restrictions what we have now are perfect, or do you feel like they're too strong what we're currently doing?
Now you're really getting into the personal side of it.
Well, I mean, that's, what do you think's best for Oklahoma?
I think that kind of pretty much where we are right now is a good place to be. I mean, if you look at where models have said our numbers should be, we should be way higher because we don't have the strict enforcement side that, a lot of other states have put in place. But a lot of it comes down to you need to take your own personal responsibility. And if you don't feel safe on that side, going out, then make those own decisions. But same side is we've got a lot of people that would flaunt them anyway, go out and do things and have social gatherings, and I think that we're seeing a lot of cases that come through that. The main problem that I have personally with it, getting into this, whenever we're talking about the social distancing or shelter in place or safer at home, all that it's really doing is extending the period. So the goal of that is to just ensure that hospitalizations don't exceed critical levels. Mm-hmm. So the problem that really comes into play is that the virus is likely never to go away. This isn't something that's going to be defeated. It can stay on surfaces. It can stay hidden in asymptomatic people for multiple weeks. So trying to defeat this by not interacting socially in any way would mean that we would basically have to be in stay-at-home orders at least through September, and then there's still a possibility of recurrence that would come from any other avenue. So until we can actually see some basis on, you know, if you want shelter in place to be the end all to it and think that that's going to defeat, then we're basically going to have to shelter in place until some type of vaccine or inoculation is available. And then that's not on the horizon.
Right. I think that's what me and Vanessa were talking about this morning. I mean, there's 5 people in Custer County currently affected. There's 12,000 people in the city of Weatherford. At some point, we all have to eventually get it, right, to end this. Or at some point, we all have to eventually get a vaccine for it or fight it off or vice versa, kind of like cold and flu season. You just know eventually you're going to get it, and hopefully this flu shot worked, or hopefully this just has the death rate on this thing is higher, and that's especially for the higher at-risk people. And so I'm with you. I don't quite understand how staying at home's helping other than slowing down the spread, which eventually you have to get it.
Yeah, and that's the big part of it is there going to be full immunity afterwards? News out of China is that there's being recurrence in people that have already been exposed and had it and confirmed. But I think for the most part, there's some immunity because the virus isn't changing much.
Right.
So there's going to have to be some answers, and just hiding from it is not going to fix it and not going to allow us to get back to our activity. But it is lowering the numbers for the time being. So
when do you think you'll feel comfortable again going to, I don't know, are you an OSU or OU guy, but let's say you're either one. When would you feel comfortable going to a OU or OSU football game with 30,000 of your closest friends?
I being young and healthy, and I wouldn't be afraid to right now.
Okay.
And I'm kind of in the point that if I could get an inoculation, I would take it and try to fight through it. And then if I'm one of the ones that has to be hospitalized, then that's part of it. But I don't like living in fear on everything, and I feel that's kind of where we're sitting right now. But I do understand there are other people that are way more susceptible, and I interact with them. So that's kind of more where I'm taking the side of we're trying to protect that vulnerable population.
Right. I mean, that's the big part, right? All this time and free time, I should be at my grandparents' house on their place just hanging out with them, as much time as I don't get to spend. But you just don't want to be all of a sudden you be the reason something bad happens.
Yeah.
And I'm with you.
And that's exactly it.
What are you guys doing for Easter?
We're going to have family get-together. We're going to have a sunrise service out kind of on our farm in vehicles, and then I guess my immediate family's going to get together, have some ham and deviled eggs.
Nice. You can't go wrong with that. John, are you still at the age where you still Easter egg hunt, or?
No, I've got a couple nieces. They do, but I don't know if we're going to do any this year. If it'd just be those two. So
that's
normally
true.
We get all the cousins together and everything.
Right. Maybe you can dress up as the Easter Bunny, and that'd be fun.
Yeah.
That's your role now.
Yeah, that's the new role.
Just draw it on my mask.
Are you a mask guy?
Yeah, I've been wearing one. Again, I deal with vulnerable population in my law practice.
Yeah.
And so I just want to ensure that I'm not spreading it to anybody. I'm willing to take those risks myself, but I don't want to be them. Anybody else.
I get that. That is a neat idea, though, for the disposable ones. You could draw the bunny whiskers on there. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to visit with us. And if somebody wants to get a hold of you personally, how do they do that?
Best way right now is email, just because we're not in the Capitol and it takes a while to reroute phones. They go through my EA up there first. So brent.howard@oksenate.gov.
Well, you have a great Easter weekend, however it turns out, and thanks for talking to us.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Lucille's Roadhouse sponsoring Conversation Corner, fish and chips today.
24